Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Prabhav Shrestha, and I'm the Marketing and Customer Success Manager at Solvoyo. Welcome to this morning's webinar on success factors for retail supply chain analytic projects. I know, especially in the US, this is a bit of a busy week with everyone returning back from July 4th vacation. So we truly appreciate your time with us this morning. We have two great panelists with us today. First, we have Lois Bale, Director of Merchandising and Planning at De Facto, one of Europe's fastest growing fast fashion retailer. Also with us is Yosun Denizeri, who leads the retail practice at Solvoyo. Prior to Solvoyo, Yosun held a variety of key planning and merchandising roles with leading retail apparel retailers including Gap and Cachet. We are so thrilled to have them both today with us and to get some valuable on-the-ground insights from them. We have two key agenda topics today. First, I will quickly walk through some key retail industry trends and supply chain benchmark data to ground this morning's discussion. Lois and Yosun will then lead the rest of the webinar focused on factors that help determine what makes analytic projects successful in the world of retail supply chain analytics. A few quick housekeeping points before we start. All attendees will be on listen-only mode throughout the session. At any point, attendees can submit questions for the panelists via the Q&A portal on GoToWebinar. There is about 15 minutes we've budgeted for Q&A with the panelists at the end of the session, so we really encourage everyone to submit any questions they have along the session, and we will try and get as many of them answered at the end. Contact information for the panelists will also be displayed at the end of the session for any direct follow-ups any of our attendees would like to make with our panelists. We plan to run the session for about 40 minutes with about 15 minutes Q&A, and with that, we can begin. So a quick catch-up on the retail industry. Both in the US and worldwide, the industry is back on growth footing, with the US retail industry projected to grow at about 4%, while the global market at about 7%. Online sales growth continues to outpace overall growth, and that's forcing retailers worldwide to continue to focus on enabling technologies like apps and digital marketing tools. In terms of potentially disruptive technologies in the horizon, AI, augmented reality, IoT, all could have very interesting impacts on how retailers market and run their operations. One emerging technology, machine learning, which essentially employs techniques like pattern recognition and clustering, is actually being used by a few of our retailer clients to sort through big data and make sharper forecasts of demand that really help them squeeze additional performance from their supply chain plans. But survey after survey, one point that really emerges is that retail is still a case of back to the basics. Having a unique quality product at the right price, which is essentially merchandising 101 for this crowd, still trumps any technology or channel when it comes to deciding the fate of retailers. Success in retail is directly tied to successful merchandising, and we're so glad that we have two panelists with strong merchandising experience here with us today. Finally, before turning to our panel, we wanted to share some of our retail benchmarking findings of what we measure as success factors in retail: revenue growth, gross margins, and inventory turns. This slide is based on benchmarking work we carry out at Solvoyo, where we track financial reports of about 312 publicly traded global apparel and department store companies. What we see from the data is that over the last 5 years, most retailers have spent time focused on maintaining positive growth, while gross margins have stagnated at around 42%. Inventory turns has not fared much better either. Over the last 5 years, of our benchmark pool of 312 publicly traded global retail companies, we see that on average, inventory turns have declined at about 1.5%, and our average for our benchmark pool is about 4.6 times per year. Supply chain analytics at its core is all about helping retailers balance the key metrics around revenue growth, margins, and inventory, and achieve high marks across the board. What defines the measure of success, at least in financial terms, is improvements for retailers across these broad spectrums versus just revenue growth or margin improvements or pure inventory-focused supply chain strategy. With that, I'd like to bring in Yosun to dive in more on the issues, the what, the who, the how, and when supply chain leaders at retailers need to think about when planning analytic projects that can help them achieve superior supply chain results. With that, Yosun, please take it away.
Thank you, Prab. Shall I take the presentation over as well? Okay, are we good?
Yep, Yosun, it looks great.
Okay, perfect. All right, so today we gathered around the table, well, between me and Luis, to discuss and share our experiences from many years of implementing supply chain analytics projects. And we basically boiled the success factors into 4 categories. One being the scope, kind of what's some of the best practices going about defining the scope. The other being the who of this equation, or the right resources that should be considered, must-have resources for these projects to be successful. And the how includes the key factors in finding the right solution. And here we're going to dive into, especially in the case of going with external partners, what are some of the key aspects that should be considered in choosing the right solution with an external partner. And in terms of this deployment timing, what are the factors to be considered for a successful deployment timing? Okay. Now, when we say supply chain analytics projects, I just want to take a moment to review what we mean in our world, in Solvoyo world, in terms of the various aspects of the supply chain that we help support in decision making. So our view on supply chain for retail is actually a complete end-to-end planning and execution decision support on a single platform. So that means going from hindsighting, basically understanding to what happened last year or past season, how our stores are performing, how different price categories are performing, how different sizes are performing in different parts of our market, to how the individual transactions are evolving at the market basket level, to the category management, so going up to the planning levels in terms of what we're going to do in the next season, next year, across the channel, across the product categories, and coming up with an integrated assortment planning that ties organically into financial planning and creates an open-to-buy plan, and then leads to an in-season flow management, which then is integrated into initial purchase order calculations and planning. That takes to initial allocation when the goods are received. Takes care of the replenishment at the store level, as well as if and when the company chooses to do store-to-store transfers. And in the case the company actually is managing their own transportation between the stores, between the warehouses, from the warehouses to the stores, to actually come up with the best, most optimal, most cost-effective, most time-effective way of sending those different modes of transportation out. To also come back and understand the pricing implications on the demand side, to do promo planning, and at the end, as an end-of-life management tool, markdown optimization. So everything that I've listed here, we at Solvoyo consider as part of a single end-to-end closed-loop planning and execution decision support platform. And the downstream conversations we're going to have here will highlight some of these that we have implemented at de facto. So Luis will talk to them. But if you have questions about anything else, we can discuss them as well. Just for the sake of time here, we just decided we would focus on the implementations we've done at de facto, which is mostly it's on the initial allocation, replenishment, store-to-store transfers, as well as in-season markdown, and we'll just have an ongoing clustering project as well. Okay. As an approach to retail analytics and decision support, we understand that there's actually different capabilities in this world that come in various shapes and forms with varying business value and complexity. So we all have been through various ways of understanding what has happened or is happening through using Excel or business insights, business information systems to get just some dashboard information, what happened last week, what happened last year. So those we consider as descriptive, right? And it's at the kind of the lowest level of complexity. And while, of course, it's good to have visibility to your business, all it's saying is this is what happened in the past. There's the next level of sophistication that we call the diagnostic capabilities. And there is basically being able to do analysis to drill down to understand the reasons behind what's happening. So it could be, for instance, in the case of price analysis, you could see this is my average price, right? This is my by category. Your typical hindsighting report would say on your sweaters, your AUR was $39 last year, right? So that's a descriptive report. Now, once you get into diagnostic, now you're able to drill down into that report and say, really, how did I get to 39 across the life cycle? And there you're starting to look at, well, actually, in the beginning, your average ticket price was 59, and then you start applying discounting throughout the life of your product or life throughout that season. You applied about 30% discounting, and this is how you arrive at your final AUR. So this is a diagnostic capability. It will also include things that will draw your attention to what was above and beyond some limits that you set. If you do exceptional reporting, you can get, well, you said you were going to only, your budget was 20%, but here are all the areas where you actually discounted 30%. So all of those capabilities that will get into the how things happened the way they happened, we call it diagnostic capabilities. Now we get into the more interesting side of our business that brings in the smarts into this whole equation, which is the capability that tells you what is likely to happen in the future. Okay, and this is all the what if analysis. So you're as a user saying, okay, I understand we sold things in general at $39, but what would happen if I were to try to sell them at $49 in the future, right? So that is a what if scenario, and the tools coming back, well, this is going to be your unit sales, this is going to be your margin, this is going to be your revenue, that type of interactive capability that we categorize as predictive. It can be predictive in terms of demand planning, it could be predictive in terms of gross margin, it could be applied in pricing strategies to do what if modeling, or you could be just doing some bottoms-up forecasting and assortment planning. What if I were to buy 10,000 units of this type of style? How much would I sell through at the end of its life? So those are all what if cases that the engine or the tool comes back with a result that could be different than what you had experienced in the past. And then the ultimate capability in terms of complexity and the add value to the business is the prescriptive one, where you're getting actually actionable recommendations. And this is where things get really interesting, because you might be running an organization where you have to make thousands of decisions or hundreds of thousands of decisions every day, and no one has the time to sit down and to do a what-if analysis on every single decision. So instead, a capability like Solvoyo, allocation, replenishment, store-to-store transfer, or markdown optimization, or IPO modules tell you actually this is what you need to do. In terms of, again, pricing, markdown optimization goes through all possible pricing scenarios and tells you, look, in order to exit the whole collection by these exit states that you have defined, these are all the price actions you need to take. So then your analyst or planner doesn't have to go through trying every single price point to come up with the optimal one that gives you the maximum gross margin and the best sell-through. So that's the prescriptive. So in all of our supply chain analytics capabilities, we basically are swimming in all of these lanes, and of course adding the most value in the last one, in the prescriptive one. Okay, and now I'll give Louise an opportunity to talk about how some of these capabilities, some of those, especially the prescriptive capabilities, were implemented at de facto, the scale of the decisions that we're supporting, and the different solutions that are actually currently running there. Some of them are already actually on autopilot, meaning they're just running without any human interaction, while others include some, of course, human interaction and approval.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. Just really putting the Solvoyo solution into working practice for our business de facto. We're a relatively young business, only came into concept from a wholesale background from about 2004. But we've grown quite dramatically, particularly here in Turkey, with an ambition then to include much more of a global feel for our business, where the estate has actually grown to over 400 stores currently. We actually trade in 17 countries, and that's a mixture, both corporate stores and also a franchise proposition. In terms of level of growth, we're easily into double-digit numbers year on year, and we're looking at least between 30 and 40% growth. So it's quite a proposition for a business that is fiercely ambitious in the future. And for us to actually deliver that ambition, obviously we need some sort of systematical systems to enable the growth level. In terms of complexity, I think you can see from the slide here, we talk about over 40 clusters, 17 countries, and 600,000 SKUs. But as part of the range build, we've been working on 8 phases. We've been looking at 60 collections going in to support fashionability, and also around about 50 buyer groups, all of which need treatment in order, from a replenishment point of view, to ensure that the product is being placed in the correct place to optimize sales and button down really the possibility of triggering that sale. Most businesses in the past have had manual allocations where a lot of the decision is driven by the allocators in terms of where to place the replenishment quantity, which can be up to about 40% of your overall buy. So you're relying a lot on decision making by the team. And a lot of the metrics that they would use are things like spot cover. Whereas investing in a solution like Solvoyo gives you a predictive view, looking at sales curves both by product type, also by location and timing, to ensure that you are securing that 60% investment in your replenishment stock and putting it in the right places. It's been incredibly important for us in terms of from first concept into go live took about 5 months before we started using the allocation of the replenishment system completely in a domestic market. We've had a lot of success in supporting peaks and troughs of trading. If I think about things that are specific to Turkey, obviously with Bayram being immensely important to us and much bigger than you would ever expect, say, a Christmas sales peak to occur. We've also had a lot of success with store-to-store transfers, which again makes me slightly uneasy as a planning director, because I'd like to think that we're trying to get the best out of the initial placement of stock. But in levels of return that we've had, you can see by the slide that store-to-store transfers generated an excess of 7 million by redistributing stock that went to inappropriate stores at the start, and then with the Solvoyo solution was then geared towards targeting the greater possibility of securing that sale in a different store. We started off early in the season transferring quantities of about 300,000, and I see that the latest one predicts about 800,000 units in the domestic. Actually, I lie, actually, it's not the domestic market, it's international as well. And the opportunity that we have for securing additional revenue could be in the excess of 15 million. Also, as part of this transfers, we've been able to improve availability. A lot of our business currently is geared towards key and basic styles. So in order for us to miss opportunity, well, negate that missed opportunity, we've been able to increase our availability on those key styles by up to 90%. So there are lots of positive things that have happened with the introduction of Solvoyo, and it's an up and running solution. So defining the scope, you've got to be very clear about your requirements really within the solution, and working hand in hand with the guys there to make sure that capabilities and what's relevant for your business needs to be thought through. I'm thinking about the company goals. When we started 4 years ago, our international estate was relatively small, and now we have the ambition of over 40 countries in the next year or so. As I mentioned, we're trading in 17 currently. So we need to think about differential ranging to satisfy local needs, all the different trading patterns as well. So using a solution like Solvoyo helps us actually work through those metrics and come up with a better and simpler planning proposal. Quick wins on the slide. Obviously, I've just mentioned about store-to-store transfers and availability. I'm also thinking about using this solution as well to think about your continuity product, your never out of stock product. Things like white t-shirts, white shirts, black leggings, black trousers. And a quick win that Solvoyo could offer was predicting actual sales opportunity and then streaming that through to the supply side. So you almost taken up pain of people making decisions back at head office, that it goes straight through from the solution to the supplier and then into the supply chain and into the store.
Okay, and here basically one of the things to consider in terms of the scope, as Louis said, is in addition to your current needs, to understand where the company is headed and to come up with actually a scope that will support the company's growth plans, while keeping an eye on, in terms of the prioritization, some quick wins that will bring immediate value to the business. And these quick wins could be different from company to company, but doing things like in companies and in countries where it's relevant, store-to-store was one of the quickest ones for de facto. That may be different, of course, for a different company or for a different country, depending on the logistics there. But it's definitely worth, in terms of the defining scope, to understand what are some of the quick wins for the company that will bring immediate business benefits early on in the project, while keeping your eye on the end goal of maybe the strategic goals that should be supported over the next couple of years.
And then within that, thinking about business structure and making sure that you have teams in place that will embrace the solution and think about the overall potential that the solution can offer you as a business. Definitely important to have a project champion in place, that it is part of a steering group that keeps the business on track, thinking about, you mentioned about the goals, delivering those goals in a timely manner. And then stakeholders, it's very important that everybody within the business understands the solution touches on them. So it's not just something that's just relevant for buying merchandise. We need to think about the logistics stream, what it means to the retailers in terms of, we mentioned availability. It just means that their life will be much easier from a seller and customer perspective. Vital are subject matter experts on board, because they are able to facilitate the project in such a way that the needs of the business are recognised, and the resources and actually the in-house skill level is proportionate for this solution. And then, of course, IT resources enabling you to deliver what you want to do. And then most importantly is the external partners to make sure that you are of one mindset with the consultants or solution partners that you buddy up with. That again, you understand, you have retail knowledge between you. It's very important then to think about a win-win solutions where they may have other ideas or have worked in other companies that again have different resource or different perspective on things that maybe you could feed into your business to streamline and just make things operationally better. Right.
One thing I do want to stress out here is the importance of the involvement of the SMEs, the subject matter experts, throughout the project. Oftentimes, what I've experienced in many years of managing implementations, either on software side or actually on the user side, is projects are outsourced to consultants, consulting companies, or IT groups, and they put together some tools, and they come and run some tests with a select number of people who are just trying to learn the system, and then they walk away. And there isn't enough knowledge base built within the users themselves, so they have to keep relying on the external resources or the IT team who has now moved on to other projects. So one of the things that each company who's implementing these tools should account for, budget for, and train people for is this very important role of subject matter experts that are going to be intimately involved with the tools throughout the configuration process, throughout the validation and testing, and post-go live, they would be the go-to resources within that organization. We all know there's a lot of turnover, especially in retail, in apparel retail business. You have new people coming through the organization. These people will need to learn these tools, so you do need to have that internal knowledge base that's going to be passed to the future generations of the users. But also, they should be the first point of troubleshooting, problem resolution, giving guidance to the rest of their colleagues, so their activities are not hindered by waiting for someone outside the organization to interfere, to help them out.
And it's a good part of a productive change management strategy to have the SMEs in place, because generally they are looked to by other members of the organization. And also, if you have SMEs involved at the very heart of the change, it means then that there's confidence given to the business. So the people working with them, around them, peer groups, again, it just makes the whole execution of the new project or the new change to be easy and productive.
Exactly, because if they are concerned about the benefits of the tool because they've just come at the nth hour of the implementation, they're not going to be a lot of help in terms of embedding these new practices into the organization. But if they're actually part of the process throughout the configuration of the tool, then they are going to be the first ones, obviously, that need to be convinced and bought into. And then once they're convinced that these tool is working for them, they are going to be the champions of the project that's going to lead to their colleagues' acceptance and usage of the tools more effectively. Okay, and now moving on to the external partners. In terms of finding the right solution, there's of course always the tool and capability and the functionality side, but there's also the people side. There's also the strategy side, understanding what the company's strategies are and being able to align themselves to your company's strategies. There's the system side, the integration side, the support side. So I'll talk a little bit about each one of them, and also ask Luis to jump in at any point. We talked about looking at your solution partner. They may be consultants, they might be software companies, from their ability to understand, first of all, what you're trying to achieve in your business. Because each business is at different points in their life. Some businesses could be going through an amazing growth, and for them, being able to scale up very fast might be a big priority. For some others, they might be going through tough times. They're just trying to maintain their business as is, but they might be cost strained and they're trying to, without losing a lot of top line, they might be looking for ways to minimize their costs. So different companies are going through different challenges, and it's important for you to communicate and to find a partner that can understand what is it that your company is trying to achieve and can also show experience and expertise in going through situations like that. The other one is in terms of their solutions, the expandability, the flexibility, the configurability. One of the things Luis mentioned about de facto is this amazing growth phase that they've gone through. And in preparation of this presentation, I kept seeing the number of countries go up. Every presentation I was pulling from my document library, one of them said 12 countries, the other one said 13, 14. It was like every quarter we were adding countries.
So now I've shocked you because I said 40 now by the end of next year.
Yeah, so there is definitely, if that type of growth is being experienced, the solutions that are going to be the right fit has to be able to scale without a glitch at that rate of growth and without adding months and months of, transition time. And so when you add another country, it shouldn't be, oh, now we're going to have another 3 months of implementation time. If you're a fast-growing company like that, that's the solution that you need is that type of responsive, configurable tool. When you're adding a new country, it's not even just, okay, another 10 stores, 50 stores. It's another currency that needs to be brought in.
Or it may be another channel, because it might not just be the country, it might be a channel within the country. So rather than a corporate store, it may be a franchise partner, or it might be an e-com. So again, there's further complexity bolted on.
Exactly, because some of the growth could be coming from adding a lot of franchise agreements, right? And some of those that need to be there, definitely like the how much to buy conversation has to include the demand that you see in your franchise channel as well. So that type of flexibility and configuration is going to be important. But in terms of what are your priorities, of course, your company's own story, own growth strategy is going to determine the level of flexibility and expandability that you need. We all work in companies who have existing legacy systems. The legacy systems are not going away. There's definitely the ERP systems that now are used at all levels of the companies, from really big to real small. One of the questions that we get, especially from the IT teams, is, does your tool integrate with your current ERP system? Now that has become really the must-have in this business, because you can't assume this new decision support tool is necessarily going to replace an existing system, because the existing system could be doing a lot more than that specific category of decisions that you're supporting. We always see it. There's an existing ERP system. Some of the planning is being done there, but now the planning complexity has evolved so much faster than the ERP system itself, so they want to take on a more sophisticated planning module, and now the question is, how do these two, coexist? That integration should not be this whole year-long project either. I mean, now in this day and age, we can do integration, of course, with the right resources involvement in 1 to 2 months, and that should be one of the considerations that you have when you're talking to your software partners. Scalability, we talked about. There's also the scalability at the functionality level in terms of the users as well. If you are growing a lot significantly around the globe, you might be also adding not just in terms of units or stores to manage, but also people that are going to be concurrently using the system, right? So you might be going, with every country you're adding, you might be adding maybe 10, 15 new planners. So that type of concurrent user scalability should also be a consideration. Cost of implementation and ownership, I think that speaks for itself. Obviously, everybody's one of the major considerations, especially in this day and age, is the total cost. And in terms of assessing the total cost, you should take into account really more of a projected lifetime cost, not just in this current, the next 3 months of the project, but what is it going to cost your IT organization if you're doing something in-house, if you're comparing different options. It's not just about the duration of the project, but the lifetime of cost. And what we're seeing is more and more so hosted solutions, cloud-based hosted solutions, where, like in the case of Solvoyo, you're paying a monthly fee, almost like a subscription fee that you pay for your cable or Wi-Fi subscription, that gives all the responsibility, hardware, software, maintenance, everything to the solution provider, and your IT team doesn't really have to be concerned, except for some points of data integration and flow that they need to be involved with. So there's always, I think nowadays, your option to get a hosted environment, to get a completely online web-based tool without having to purchase each additional software that needs to be implemented at a new user computer all the way across the world. Someone has to go over there, install it on their computer, make sure it works, and even maybe maintain an localized IT team just to make sure that these things are working as well all the way in India, in Malaysia, in South Africa, in Latin America, and in Turkey at the same time. So there are definitely ways to reduce your cost of ownership as well. And then also the other consideration is level of support that you will get after going live. And there you should have some really candid questions, not just about the 30-day test and validation period, which is the industry standard. I've lived through this so many times. The first 30 days, actually, not many problems come up because usually users are just trying to learn the system. And there it's more of a training problem, but the real configuration request, or how do I do that? Is there a way to do this differently? Types of questions come up usually after 30 days, sometimes even after 3 to 6 months, because it takes about an organization, of course, depending on how complex the capability you're adopting, but it does take an organization about 6 months to adapt, to digest a new solution. And then the really creative thinking starts happening. And you want your solution partner to be available and collaborate with you and to answer your questions, not just during the 30 days after go live, but actually on a continuous basis. Anything you want to add, Liz?
No, I just want to add that we've had terrific support from Solvoyo. I think they've been regularly coming into the office pretty weekly. So in terms of the after support, they've been pretty amazing, actually.
Thank you. Okay, and in terms of the deployment timing, please, do you want to speak to your personal experience in terms of
You've just got to be cute about your time frames, because previous businesses that I've been involved in, that they may go live with a certain solution and it's just before peak sales, or it might be just before Christmas or just before Bayram. So I think you have to plot out where you think the most, from terms of successful launch, low stock inventory, most people in the business, training and development obviously is very important as well. And then, as you see on the slide there, to make sure that you have your complement of subject matter experts in place that have actually talked through the solution before amongst themselves and with other areas within the business before you consider exactly what you want to get out of this, and scoping out really the benefits of the project. And then as you actually work through with the project. You know, Joseph just talked about in 6 months, then all the tricksy questions come through. I think it's how you can build on and think about further opportunities that the solution may give you. Because we've touched briefly on clustering, and then clustering then could expand from a fashionability point of view to pricing architecture to a cultural view as well. So it's how you could actually move the solution forward to deliver other things that may necessarily from the first concept that you hadn't thought about. And then, of course, devoting time, because again, it's part of a change management approach. People that get picked to be subject matter experts, if you can get them away from their day job to actually focus on delivering the new system, new project, that's a massive benefit. Unfortunately, most businesses don't have the luxury enabling them to do that, and you'll find that subject matter experts would have to devote 2 or 3 days a week to ensuring success to the new project. But I think it's really prioritizing what's really important for the business from a medium to long-term view. Communication within the business to ensure that that happens timely, and of course all of the support that you might get from the steering group, again, has to be considered.
Exactly. I mean, that's where change management, that's being led by the project champion and the steering committee members, becomes very important, because they have to keep reminding the organization that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Because everyone who's gone through this project, we all know it gets worse before it gets better, right? Yeah, it's always hard to start doing things in a different way. So the users, typical response is, I could have done this quicker in Excel.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Absolutely. But they need to understand the long-term benefits.
Right.
And the only way that you can support that is with regular communication with whoever is involved in the project and the outcome, the final users, to make sure that they're in the loop and they understand that actually their lives will become better, simpler and more productive and efficient in the long term.
Right. And overall, the ability of the organization to support scalable growth. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're investing tools like this is, yes, when there's only maybe one cluster, right, when you're managing prices or flow strategies with only one country, one cluster, things can be managed in Excel. But when you're talking about, okay, now, you know, little by adding 5 countries every year, we're going to double the number of countries in 2 years, and we can't keep hiring the number of people that is now needed to run the domestic market. Like we were talking about how you might, in current day, actually your life might be pretty good, and you might have a lot of dedicated resources doing a lot of thorough manual work, but that organization might not be scaled, reflected when you're doing your international growth. So in your case, you know, you might have, I don't know, 50 planners maybe working on Turkey, but for each country that you're adding on the international side, you're not going to get additional 50 planners. You know that, right?
Absolutely. So it's about the scale of intelligence that the system can provide you with, because exactly right, you will not have the resources to have an infinite number of people making these decisions. So for us, as the global growth continues, we'll be relying more and more on solutions such as Solvoyo to enable us to trade successfully.
Okay. I think we actually covered in terms of solution when we're talking about solution partners, what we would be looking for. We did talk about industry experience, relevant experience, not only just in the specific industry, but in terms of the experience you're going through as a company. Innovation is, I think, is one of the must-haves nowadays, because the technology is changing so fast. Your partners themselves should be actually showing you the way, and always coming with kind of more smarter, better ways of doing business. I think we talked about other things like integrated the advantage of having things on the same platform, and good listening skills is always a must in every I think project in every relationship is not just applied to supply chain analytics, but definitely I think a big part of the business is to having a partner that listens to you, but also listens to the rest of the industry, so they can keep feeding you insights as well. Okay, now time for our Q&A. Was there anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you guys. That was great. So just a reminder again, all attendees, if you have questions for the panelists, please go ahead and submit them through the webinar interface, and we'd be happy to put them in front of our panelists. We've got about 14 minutes mark, and we've got one or two questions that have already started coming in that I'll start presenting to the panelists. But again, as a reminder, if you have any questions, please go ahead and submit those online. So first, it sounds like this is more for Lewis. The question is, as part of a high-growth company, how have you guys internally balanced meeting some of the demands of growth and maybe some of the other demands around balancing margins and inventory? Philosophically, is there a bias, internally within the company when you're making some merchandising or planning decision that, it's much more geared towards, let's support growth, or, has it always been balanced, and is it always balanced?
It is the culture of this business, because the growth, it hasn't gone through just a plateau and then a growth. It's literally an expectation of the business. So it's inherent to our work ethos and our approach, to be honest. I have to say that it's difficult because most of the in-house solutions that we have tend to be run through Excel. But we're working together with other partners to come up with planning solutions that may enable us to grow faster and more successfully. Because I have to say, there are a few issues that we encounter, and we recognise that we could do a lot better. But then it's about an integrated system requirement, actually, and Solvoyo certainly has given us that from a replenishment, allocation, and transfer perspective, and obviously with markdown too.
Got it. Perfect. Yusuf, this is more for you. How does ERP fit into the analytics system?
ERP is always there as the backbone, as the infrastructure, as the system of record for all the transactions. But it doesn't always meet the needs in terms of analytical complexity and sophistication, and also what if scenario testing. One of the reasons most commonly we have to bring on additional decision support systems is because ERP is really meant to be a transaction management tool. It's not meant to be a what-if analysis tool where there are 15 different views of the world. It's very good at keeping track of one view of the world that you're going with. That may be your plan. That may be actually what happened. That may be your actual purchase orders. But they don't, and they were not meant to be supporting all these different what-if analysis, different types of analytics and optimization tools. The ERPs don't usually come with, they might, some of them come up with some predictive capabilities, but they often don't come with prescriptive capabilities, the optimization capabilities. But again, they're always the backbone of the transaction, so you have to make sure you have a good working ERP, so your record of what actually happened or is happening is good, because basically in the decision support systems, garbage in, garbage out, right? If your ERP is somehow miswired and it's not giving you the real truth about what's happening in your business, your decision support systems are not going to fix that, because you're just feeding the data that you get from your ERP and your decision support system. So that's how they basically work in the context. It's not either or. They both have to be there, and they both have to do what they're meant to do, right? And like I said, the ERPs are mostly meant to keep track of the actual plans, approved plans after they've been approved, or the transactions.
Got it. Okay. Yes, this one seems to be back to you. You mentioned about must-haves versus nice-to-haves. When you would grow as a high-growth company, what was some of the experience you had in terms of winning support for what could be considered nice-to-have analytics at de facto?
Nice to have might be things like within clusters price banding. So recognizing opportunity of a price strategy at cluster product type. At the moment, I've talked about having the store-to-store transfer is a nice quick win, and that's with the available stock on hand. We're putting it in a better place to actually trigger and capture that sale. Nice to have might be things in terms of color prediction or stock outs in certain clusters of stores. I feel that that's more or less fine-tuning, basically, a planning or a replenishment solution, long-term view. So I think really for any business going on this journey, I think you've really got to home in on, again, which actually makes the business more open to change, about the quick wins to deliver turnover, and then talk about how you could open that out for other more complex and sophisticated variables or sophisticated metrics.
Got it. And yes, and this is a quick one. By the way, the contact information of the panelists is up on the screen. Please feel free to note it down. And if we're not able to get to your question during the session, our panelists have agreed to kind of open themselves up to further inquiries. So please note that down. And if we cannot get to your question, feel free to reach out to our panelists. Yes, and this one's for you. The question is, how is the Solvoyo system different than a TMS system?
Sorry, could you repeat that? We couldn't hear that.
Sure. The question is, how is Solvoyo different than a TMS system?
TMS?
TMS?
Yes. I think the question is TMS meaning transportation management solution. I guess I think the attendee was trying to understand how we differentiate ourselves from a traditional TMS solution. If you have any quick thoughts on that.
Oh, okay. Well, the typical transportation management solution is about the logistics itself. It's about how to get products from one place to the other, and maybe finding the most profitable couriers or the best routing or the best schedule. But actually what we went through in terms of the retail analytics is actually the transportation is only a tiny part of it, and most retailers, they tend to outsource it. They don't do it themselves. But the rest of the aspects of the Solvoyo analytics platform is actually about what product to sell, how much to sell it at, when to mark it down, how much to buy, when actually to bring the replenishment in, how much to send to each store. So while the transportation side could be part of the solution, most of the things that keep us busy, I think retailers at night,
securing the sale.
It's about the product, making sure that the right product is being offered at the right price to the right segment of the overall market, right, and at the right time.
Got it. Okay, sounds good. So I think based on the interest of time, we're going to do one last question, and there are 2 or 3 questions that are kind of related. So I'm going to kind of try and lump them into one. And this is both to Lois and Yosu. Both of you talked a lot about change management, and part of change management is with new technology institutionalizing what is right now expertise that is sitting either with someone or or some team, like what we call, subject matter experts. What has been your experience in terms of getting these subject matter experts to be on the project team and to be supportive of the project and not necessarily kind of get stuck in turf wars or being a bit protective, of their current position? So, both of you, if you can share some of your experiences on that.
I can. I was part of a change management team that were involved in organizational restructure on the back of a new system upgrade and implementation. I think the way to engage subject matter experts is to show them the benefits of what the change could deliver to the business. I think scoping out the current as-is practice and what to be might look like is absolutely critical, and then understanding the system requirements to breach the difference between as-is to be, and then obviously in hand with that, the organisational structure and best practice and process for the business to enable that change. But I think really, defining what the prize might look like, the ambition of the business together with what it might look like 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, if this change is actually implemented, it's a great tool in order to engage people. And they feel actually empowered to be part of change as well. It's very, it's a great, I don't know the word, for you to be selected within your business as a subject matter expert, to be part of actually fast-tracking that business or propelling it into an elevated status, it is quite an honour, actually.
Now, and I don't mean to get into the whole HR part of it, but I've worked with HR teams to actually come up with incentives, right, for the SMEs to be recognized. Because what the organization is asking of them is going to be going the extra mile. And if they are, as part of their performance goals or performance reviews, if that whole project success is incorporated to give them the message, this is not just about your team, your function, or you yourself, it's about your, compensation or your promotion is tied to the overall success of the project, and there are ways to work this through. Again, HR, don't take my word for it, but go and talk to your HR teams basically on what are the ways that your organization can make this happen. But, as a company, acknowledging that you do want to pick some exceptional people who have the motivation, the drive, the energy to push this company forward, and they should be there, recognized in a different way than people who just do their 9-to-5 job.
Got it. The quintessential carrot and stick, right? Brought to you by Lewis and Yusuf. A little bit of empowering, a little bit of encouragement, but also make
stick. Or chocolate. Chocolate always works.
Chocolate. Well, on behalf of the company as well as all our attendees today, Lewis, thank you so much for all your insights at De facto, and Yusuf, thank you so much for your time today. I think it was a great panel. We've got some follow-up questions that we didn't get a chance to address, and I'll follow up with them individually, as well as once again, thank you for our panelists. Their contact information is out there. If any of you want to note it down, I'll leave that on for a minute after we end the webinar, so you can reach out to our panelists. Thank you again so much. I think we're right on the mark for an hour. I really appreciate your all time. I really appreciate the panelists, your time, and thank you so much. And we hope you continue to join additional webinar sessions as we organize them. And we thank you for your time today, and thank you for joining us. Have a good and wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good. Now we can go and have a glass of wine.